So, do you find yourself being more sensitive when compared to your friends or family? Does your environment sometimes stress you out? Do you feel that there's some kind of a noise in your life? Well, if you do, then I'm here to tell you that you have a sensitive soul. And today I've brought on someone highly sensitive herself who's here to show you that being sensitive is your superpower. Today on the show, I have a medical doctor, best-selling author, speaker. She leads workshops and is an energy healer and the founder of the Academy of Light Medicine. She also has a degree in biochemistry, which is an area of my interest. And she's been an assistant professor in UCLA. Dr. Karen Khan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, CJ. I'm so honored to be here.
I'm so honored to have you on my show today, Doctor. So, when I look at your profile, you've got an impressive background in terms of education. But talk to me about your journey post education. Have you faced any medical issues or any problems as a medical doctor, or you never
Yeah,
get sick?
definitely. Well, since I've always a highly sensitive person, but didn't really honor that growing up because I wanted to be like everyone else. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to be tough. I wanted to be like, woo,
Hmm.
superhero. I've loved superhero movies since I was really, really young. So I kept trying to be who I was not. And throughout my journey, going to school, I was a high achiever, so trying to get top of the class, A pluses, scholarships, the whole bit. And after medical school, I didn't really realize how burnt out my body was because, as you can imagine, in medical school, we, go days on end without sleep,
Hmm.
being on call and seeing very, very stressful situations, seeing people die and be incredibly sick. So I didn't realize that as a sensitive person that I was kind of absorbing all of that, really feeling, all of that stress and that pain of other people's stuff, and didn't really know that I was still holding it on to my, in my body. So my physical body finally kind of burnt out, and I had developed chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, autoimmune diseases, multiple chemical sensitivities, EMF sensitivities. I basically was depressed and miserable. In fact, I was so bad. I felt like I wanted to kill myself, um, and I couldn't imagine, like, I thought that patients that had this kind of thing just didn't try hard enough. But then I realized when I got it that I was trying as hard as I could, and I was not healthy and not better. And one night I just, was sobbing myself to sleep, as so many nights previous to that. And I just heard a quiet voice. It was my own voice, but it was like a quiet voice that said, "You have a choice." Just very nonchalant, very neutral, no
Hmm.
emotion. And, I was kind of arguing with myself and said, "No, I don't have a choice. I have to do this and that and this." And then it kept repeating, "No, you have a choice." And so I thought, well, if I did have a choice, what would I do? And at that point in time, I really needed to divorce my then husband. Not because he was a bad person or anything like that, but it's just that it was really stressing me out not to be who I was and just trying to please everyone. I really need to be alone. And so that was the really amazing start of a incredible journey, CJ, of my life. We call that in the spiritual circles the dark night of the soul, where everything falls apart, everything's chaotic. I was in debt, I was sick, I was in partial disability. But that was the beginning of a beautiful healing process.
What steps did you take to heal yourself? Did you enroll in a course? Did you sit by yourself in silence and try to meditate on it? Like, how did you progress from having that voice into what you are today?
That is a great question. Well, I can definitely tell you I was not good at meditation, and still am not. I have my own ways of connecting. So meditation was not something that I was very good at. I was very much a doer. Um, and I think that, what got to that point was that I had been always, as a sensitive soul, this is very natural, always interested in reading like self-help books, spiritual books, that kind of thing. And so it seemed to me that once I made that commitment, I didn't realize it was a commitment at the time, but the commitment to, okay, if I did have a choice, what would I do? And just even entertain that in my mind, because I was very black and white back then. I was like, divorce is wrong, it's bad, it's evil, never do that, like. And so when I entertained the thought that maybe, possibly, I could make a choice that maybe would make me happy and not everybody else, then it seemed like I was attracting different teachers, different courses. And yeah, so I ended up finding a Reiki master in town and started taking classes with her and started getting energy healing from her. And she has wonderful insight. Um, and she's, I talk about her, Pat. Her name is Pat. Talk about her in my book, Sensitivity is Your Superpower, about how she helped me transform this illness. And then I also went to the Omega Institute and found a beautiful teacher, Yana Van Zant is her name. Cried, I think, the whole weekend. It was that powerful, and I really came home understanding. And that workshop was called "Giving from a Full Cup." And I really understood that I was depleting myself and sacrificing myself for what I thought was for the better good of others. But that I understood that there is no way that I can help others the best I can if I'm in this state of lack and loss and, you know, not being healthy. I was just pretending. So
Mm.
it really rocked me to my core. And from that point on, I started rebuilding my life and being more truthful and authentic and saying no, which is really hard for
And
sensitive
you've
people to
done
say
so well
no.
for yourself. I really respect you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a hard journey, but I wouldn't trade it for anything because I think spirit really needed to kind of knock me on my butt uh, to convince me to really follow my divine path because I was very religious growing up, so I thought doing my divine path was basically following all the rules that
Hmm.
church and society and parents said I should do. And but I wasn't happy. I was miserable, but I didn't really admit that I was miserable, so that was the problem. So I needed the illness at the time
Make you
to,
realize.
yeah, exactly, exactly. The universe conspired, if you will. I call it the angelic two by four. So, so here in America, two by four it beams. The construction workers use it, and
Hmm.
if you get the side of the head with it, get knocked out. But usually, how our angelic, helpers, God, source, however people talk about it, they kind of knock on the door gently to give you a hint. Hey, you're going the wrong way. This isn't what's aligned for you. This isn't you. And then if we don't answer that knock, then they knock louder. Hey, hey, no, 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 wrong way, right? And they knock louder. Well, I wasn't listening to anything. I was just going way too fast, really down this rabbit hole of this is the way life should be. But I was unhappy. And then finally, it was like the angel said, hey, let's get the two by four because Dr. Karen's not really listening
It's
to
about time, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
a good thing is you didn't get knocked off too hard.
yeah.
And according to one of these researches that you've cited in your book, it says that more than 30% of us are sensitive. Now, 30% is a big number. Do you
Hmm.
see any commonalities between these groups of sensitive people? You spoke about religion. So, things like race, religion, background, does this influence how sensitive people are, or is it the culture or the beliefs? Like, if you were raised in a culture that believes in the supernatural or various entities or, let's say, energies, does that make you more sensitive to them?
Great question. I have done healings, gosh, thousands and thousands of healings for clients, people, students all over the world. And the one thing is clear for me is that being a highly sensitive person or sensitive soul, that doesn't really matter where you come from, what culture, how you grew up, or your parents, or anything like that. Like it seems to be spread all over the world. Now, that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the culture is open to the concept or that it even exists. So there's a difference. Like, that 30%, I mean, it's just the latest study. Um, However, I believe that there are highly sensitive people in certain cultures where they don't really get it or they don't really think that's a thing. Whereas, for example, in North America, um, things are being a little bit more open, which is why the researchers, are from here. But they're more open, so they're asking these sorts of questions. But there is a characteristic of the highly sensitive souls that I work with that is very clear. When these children grow up or as they grow up, they tend to be ones that like they feel different from the other kids. Like they either cry very easily, they feel sad for other people easily. Some people feel they're rebellious because they question authority, and they question, like, why do I have to do that? That doesn't make sense, right? Like they'll see, for example, I'll just give you an American example. So they'll see, for example, their parents watching uh, the presidential debates, on TV, right?
Yep.
And in America, being the president is like this big, huge honor, and some families really aspire to have, well, my son could be a president or my daughter could be president, that kind of thing. So then, the children may see the parents watching the debate, and they're seeing these two adults fighting each other on TV, okay, and saying unkind things. And then, the sensitive soul will be like, that doesn't make sense. Why would I want to be like that? Like, why should you even tell me what to do? Like they'll understand on some deep level that this doesn't make sense. Like, and so they'll buck the system, and they won't like it. But not all sensitive souls are that rebellious. Some of them really are the really soft ones that really try to fit in. They're quiet, they're loving, they're empathetic. They know what people need before they even the other people know what they need. Unfortunately, as they grow up, if they are not honored for their sensitivity, they're usually told to buck up, stop being so sensitive, grow a thicker skin. And if they try to be who they're not, which is what I did, they end up
Mhm.
sick, physically sick. They can have autoimmunity, more than the average person, at least in my experience. Multiple chemical sensitivities, fibromyalgia is a typical diagnosis for highly sensitive souls who are burnt out. Chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain. So life can be really, really difficult for these folks because they were never told that they have a gift, if you will, of being sensitive, and not told how to control it. So they end up suffering from it, like I did.
When we speak about sensitive souls, one of the most common things which is generally accepted is that sensitive people are emotional. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, yeah, I think to
That
some
they're more
degree that's
emotional than
really
the
true.
others?
hmm Well, the thing is that not only do they feel their own emotions, they feel other people's emotions, and then it becomes like a deluge of emotional energy. And when they're children, this is really interesting, CJ. What I've noticed is when they're children, and they are in an atmosphere of stress, whether it be from their parents or teachers or school or other children, whatever it is, what'll happen is that all that negative energy they kind of sponge up, and they don't have the adult control over their emotions. So what happens is that they freak out and explode. I can't tell you how many children
Mhm.
I've seen come across like that. They have what they call a quote unquote meltdown. So these kids will just melt down, and then all the focus is on what's wrong with the kid. That's what bothers me, right? They're like, "What's wrong with this kid? Let's medicate this kid. Let's
It's
take
always
him
the
out of
kid's fault.
school." Yeah, right. And what it is they're just
That's not
sensing
fair.
all the negative energy around them, and that could be, Wi-Fi. That could be pesticides that they're eating. Like
Mhm.
it could be so many things, and then they explode because they have so much emotional energy pent up from other people. They have not been taught to clear it. They have not been taught to go to center. And but when they do, life is completely 180 degrees different. They do well in school, they thrive, they're happy. Yeah, it's a shame, unfortunately, that we don't really talk about sensitive children in our regular schools. At least we don't here in America.
I like the fact that you mentioned in your books and just right now that children can be sensitive to other forms of energy and chemicals. These can be just the chemicals from food or Wi Fi. And one more reason that people become sensitive is because these days we have a culture of eating more processed foods. We
hmm
lack sleep. We're looking for constant gratification, which can imbalance neurotransmitters such as dopamine, and it rewires the pleasure pathways in the brain. And as you said, EMF or electromagnetic waves coming out of the phones can also make our cells weak. Now, for someone who's listening and you're like, what is CJ and Dr. Karen talking about? And if you're next to your phone or your laptop, just know that all the time, these electronic devices can make you weak on a cellular level. by opening up things like voltage gated calcium channels, which allow for more calcium ions to jump into the cell and then just it. I'm trying to remember the right word for it, but excitotoxicity is a phenomenon where it all these calcium ions are going into the cell and then the cell finally dies and then people start becoming weak. We have been seeing prevalences of this throughout the world, and it
Absolutely.
happens more in children, right? Children are highly
Well,
sensitive to these.
yeah, children in general are highly sensitive, and there's a saying that we have. It's not a very nice saying, but it's like they're canaries in a coal mine, meaning that in a coal mine, if there's a problem with oxygen or toxic gases from the coal mine, the canary will die, and if the canary
Mhm,
dies, then the miners know they got to get up, get out of there, right? Because it's dangerous. So our children are kind of like that. Now, does it, almost all children are sensitive to some degree, to these sorts of things. But after a while, sometimes their body will just tolerate or seemingly tolerate the toxins, but it'll show up in other areas. So the highly sensitive people who seem emotional, who have these breakdowns, who have allergies, multiple illnesses, actually, to be honest, they're the ones that are actually manifesting, open, like expressing what is really going on in their environment, whereas some people that quote unquote aren't as highly sensitive may not have symptoms, but yet their bodies are still being negatively affected, like you said, with electromagnetic radiation, like cell phone radiation, wi-fi radiation. And it's not, they're not complaining of symptoms, but they could have like cancer down the line, like they don't know because they don't even, and why do some bodies have symptoms and others don't? Well, some people are very gifted in feeling things through their body. I'm one of them. It's called clairsentience. And
mhm,
there are others that are not, they don't feel their body. They're not aware, body aware. So if they're not body aware, not even realizing that they're being toxified, if you will, or being damaged. So I think it's really important for us to respect that, yeah, there are things in our environment, like you said, EMF, pesticides, herbicides, genetically modified foods, so let's go on, that are really harmful for the average human person. And our highly sensitive people having symptoms is really pointing out to us, hey, 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 this is not okay. Let's do something different.
mhm. Very well said. And I think a lot of people should be listening to all these signals that come in, and then take action as soon as possible to see some changes. Now, you mentioned that some people like yourself can feel things much better than the others. In your book, you also mentioned that are people who can hear things like
Mhm.
clairaudience, and some people who just know things such as clairknowing. And you have one more, which is clairvoyance, which are able to understand people better. Is there anything else that you've come in your practice which was out of the ordinary, like a different kind of superpower?
Oh yeah, so we're talking about, I like to call them the clairs. um, and different people will have a different dominant clair. At least in my just personal observation is, and sometimes our language will tell us, the language that we use will tell us which ones are dominant clair. Like people that say things like, "Oh, I see your point," so they may be more clairvoyant, so their eyes and vision, or if you're very highly clairsentient, you might say, "Oh, I feel you," you know.
Mhm,
And that isn't written in stone, but I often think that our language gives us away where we are. But there are these talents that are called clairs. I call them sensing talents. So sensing through the body, through vision, through hearing. People, being able to hear angelic voices or demonic voices, or something else. They can hear that through their physical ears, and sometimes they hear it through internal, you
mhm,
know, talk. Just like that one time where I heard, you have a choice, right? That was more clairaudient, but it was internal to me. I didn't feel it external to me. But some people can hear things external to them that other people can't hear. Sort of like dogs. They can hear a dog whistle, right? But humans can't. Same sort of thing.
yeah, true.
Yeah, and then there's clairescence, which is being able to smell. So, and we all have, and the thing is, we all have these talents, but we just all have them developed to a different degree and a different balance of each of them. So, The clairessence person, who's very clairessence, may be able to sense things through smell. So they might walk into a house, and I'm sure you know what this means, but they'll walk into the house and immediately know there's a mold, a toxic
Hmm.
mold in that house, and they'll walk straight out.
Yep,
you
they're
know?
super sensitive to things like these.
Yeah, and other people are like, I don't smell it. I've been to potluck parties where, I'll eat like a nut, energy ball or whatever dessert that somebody made, and the first, chew where that nut hits my taste buds. This is Claire Gustins now, or Claire Gustians. I can tell that it's rancid, and I put it down.
Oh wow.
But everyone else is eating it, and I'm like, really, guys? I say to my husband, can't you
Yeah, you're
you
the
know,
only one who's having something
yeah,
else.
my mom's really good with those Clairs. Like she'll say to my dad, she's like, "Oh, milk is bad. Don't drink it." And dad's like, "Oh, I already drank it." And she goes, "Dude,
Too
that's
late.
bad." Yeah, and Claire knowing, of course, is just knowing, and everyone wants that Claire, right? Just to know the truth, just to know in your heart of hearts, with no fanfare, no emotion, just know what the true answer is or what's really going on. I mean, that is the ultimate. Everyone wants that. But in addition to those sensing gifts, we actually have more like healing or intuiting gifts as well. Well, intuiting and sensing very similar, but manifesting gifts. So we could actually use our talents to actually create, a different future. So in the book, as you probably already read, we teach people how to influence the weather in a positive way. It's not going to do
Yep.
something that's harmful. You can't like try to hurt someone with a hurricane. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
with weather magic, it only whatever happens for the highest and greatest good. So if a hurricane does need to hit a particular area, it will. But there, sometimes we can shift the severity of a storm or completely shift course of the storm. We've done that multiple times as a group.
I was so fascinated with that after reading your book.
Yeah. Well, and some of the storms that we have are amplified or created by a man-made or non, military or secret military means. So it's interesting how Source God kind of allows us an intervention. If it
Hmm.
isn't Mother Nature naturally causing something, then we can actually intervene. There was supposed to be a really, really bad hurricane here in our area, which is not even a hurricane area. But the first one hit. I was in Toronto. I had no idea, because I didn't watch the news that it hit. I came when we drove home. Our neighbors texted us to say, "Hey, watch out for the debris on the road, and if you have problems, let us know. We'll guide you around the downed trees and everything." And I said, "What the heck happened?" She goes, "Oh, hurricane." I'm like, "What? Really?" And it really devastated this area. Not, people didn't die, thankfully, but a lot of houses were hit, and a lot of businesses went down and things like that. And so when we heard that the next one was coming, and it was going to be worse than the first. Okay. And we saw this humongous storm, on the radar. I'm like, not on my watch. Right. So I was like,
I've got to do
okay,
something
God,
about
let's do this thing. Right. Yeah. Well, the first time the first hurricane, I have to say, I feel bad about it, but I did move it. It was going to hit my friends in Florida. So I said, well, let's move this somewhere else. Right. But I wasn't very specific in what my visualization was. So it ended up hitting me or our community.
it.
Um, and I was like, okay, next time it came around, I'm like, I'm going to be much more specific. We're going to make it go outside,
As
like
far as
so,
possible.
no damage, people
Yeah.
saved, yeah. And so by the time it did come to us, it was just rain, and people were like so relieved that it wasn't a hurricane. So we've done that multiple times, and so these are some really, and everybody could do this. This is not like special to me as a sensitive soul. All these skills can be taught to someone, and I think just from what we call the ascension process, which is elevating frequencies and vibrations of the planet, the average, not quote unquote non-sensitive person is becoming more sensitive, which is why the percentage of sensitive people seems to have jumped from the 70s, 70s, 80s, from 20% to now over 30% of people, which is exciting because we really need to be empathetic with each other. Let's stop, hurting each other. Let's stop,
Let's stop hurting
you
each
know,
other. Let's help each
yeah.
other. That's the
Hmm.
goal. Do you have to step into 0 point to do this? Or can you just tell our audience what is the void or 0 point? What does this space mean?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I've never been a great fan of typical. meditation because I couldn't sit still for very long. I was always so busy.
Mhm.
And I discovered a technique from Dr. Frank Kinslow in his book, Secrets to Instant Healing. I like the word instant, which is why I read it because I like fast. And he had this technique, and I went into this space of feeling because I'm very clairsentient. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty easy. And so he encouraged people just to go into that space, which he calls you feeling, just, for a second at a time, 3 minutes at a time. I'm like, this is awesome. So I started doing that and started seeing very, very positive changes in my life. And then what did some more reading and studying. I bought every, book that he had, and one of my students didn't really understand the instructions. So because he was also clairsentient, I said, well, look, this is what it feels like in me. I'm just feeling the energy in my body. So let's have you do that now. And he could do that. And he goes, oh, I get it. I can feel it. I feel really peaceful. So what I realized was that, in that space, we could create a different outcome. And it was very powerful. And we talk about stillness, and I was like, well, what is stillness? Well, stillness is what the quantum physicists have named zero point field, which is a field of infinite possibilities. So in that field, nothing is manifest yet into the physical 3D form, but it's the possibilities of those things. So as we quote unquote still our minds, now the technique I teach in the book is stillness through observing internal movement, stillum. So as we still our minds, we end up connecting to the zero point, which is the creator, if you will. So infinite possibilities. And then from that place, anything that is stressing us out, like negative emotions or even situations, those energies seem to dissipate in the zero point field on its own, as well as us being able to create or affect a positive healing. So, do people, consciously have to go to zero point in order to be clairsentient or clairsentient? No, a lot of times it's just a natural thing. People can have these skills. However, when we decide that we want to create something that is not already here, then it's very, very helpful to have that ability. And everybody has the ability, it's just a matter of attention and practice to get into that zero point field so we can do healing, so we can create a different new reality. It's wonderful for creation. And if you're just in it, even for a few seconds at a time, I call it the auto healing state. Because I've had
Mhm.
several people, once I've taught it to them, they'll come on a healing session with me. We'll do some, testing. And as I go down the testing, I notice that their numbers are improving as we go, as I'm doing the testing. And what's happening is we put each other, we're both in the zero point field as we're doing the testing. And already things are healing, just being in that space before I do any formal Topacan healing or anything. And then the nice thing about what I teach, the Topacan healing method for my students, we can actually go back in time and test, well, what was it at the beginning of the session? So, say someone's kidneys are, by the time I tested, it's like 75% happy, and we thought it was a lot lower. So I said, oh, well, what was it, 10 minutes before we started this call? How happy were your kidneys then? And they might have gotten 40%,
Mhm.
so in that time span of just in the being state, the kidneys already started to improve. So that's kind of exciting, being in that zero point and really using that. That's a God given, opportunity or gift for all of us. And anyone and everyone can be in that.
I completely agree. And I've tried to get into that space multiple times in my meditation session. But then there's this also like a famous saying that you don't have to search for anything outside of you. Every answer or every solution that you want is in your consciousness and awareness. And one of the ways to access that divine wisdom is when you sit still and connect to stillness. But what happens is when your life's going upside down, and let's be real
Mm-hmm.
here, like what we know what's happened in 2020, when your life's going upside down, everything is just doesn't seem right. Then sitting still is very difficult because the emotional or the fear center of the brain, called the amygdala, is so hyperactive. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have any advice for people who would want to get into that stillness, but they're just hyper aroused, or how to calm down that emotional center of the brain?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different techniques that people have used. My favorite story, which I mentioned in the book, is about when I was watching a scary movie. And I was definitely hyper vigilant because I couldn't. The first time I watched this movie called The Ring, the original was very scary, and I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Finally I would fall asleep from exhaustion, but I was so exhausted for 3 days because I kept seeing those scenes in my mind and I was freaking out. And I tried, breathing meditations. I tried, Kundalini yoga. I tried progressive relaxation. I tried mantras. There were so many things that I tried. It didn't work. And I'm
Throwing
like,
everything.
forget it. So then, years went by and then I saw that they had a sequel. So my husband was like, you got to be kidding me. You're not going to do this again, are you? You didn't sleep for 3 days. And I said, well, I kind of have to see what happened, right? In that scary movie. So I knew I was going to be scared again, but I thought, you know what? I'm just going to plan for it. So if I'm, can't sleep for 3 days, it is what it is, right? So sure
Mhm.
enough, it does resolve, but the movie was scary, and I'm lying in bed wide awake and seeing scenes in my mind, and my mind is just going. And this is what people are like when they're in a quote unquote state of, anxiety or hypervigilance, and they just can't help it. Their mind is just going, 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 going. And so I thought, well, none of the other techniques helped in the past, to try to relax, to, try to, breathe these extra. I said, you know what? I'm just going to freaking be scared. I'm just going to be scared.
Mhm.
I'm scared, so I'm just gonna be scared. I just decided I'm not gonna stop trying to be scared. So what I did was I tuned in to see what my body felt like when it was scared. It was almost like a light switch, like from like almost pushing away what the body felt like because I was staying in my mind, seeing the scenes. What I did was I told my mind what to do. So I instructed my mind to look into the body and feel. And so when my mind was busy focusing on my body, it seemed sudden. Okay, I know it sounds funny because obviously I was
Mhm.
scared already, but suddenly I noticed that my heartbeat was so big and so fast. It was like, to me, it was like shaking the bed. Like 2 seconds before, I didn't even notice that, right? But now that I've turned my attention, turned my mind to see what does it feel like to be scared, I was like, the pulse was big. There's energy rushing down my arms and legs. My whole body felt like it was like electrified. But here's the thing: instead of trying to turn that off, I was like, "Huh, interesting." I was just like observing. I was like, because I said I was gonna just be scared, right? I just made up my mind. I'm just gonna be scared. Forget all
Mhm.
this other meditation stuff, right? So I just decided to be scared. And wouldn't you know it? After I'm observing my body, about 10 minutes later, I fell asleep and woke up the next morning. I was like, "Whoa, what happened?" And my husband's like, "Wow, you didn't stay up all night." I said, "No." And he says, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, actually, I wasn't really doing anything. I was just being. I was just allowing those sensations." So for those people who, are in that hypervigilant state, it can seem really scary to the mind to feel what you're feeling in your body. But if you actually accept and feel what you feel in your body without judgment, without saying it's bad, I got to get rid of it, which resistance causes persistence, then a
Mhm.
lot of times those things will start to transform automatically. But it does take some faith, to just go into the body and just to feel it, because it can be highly uncomfortable temporarily. But the mind stills because it's so focused on the body, and that's the trick. Is that you're not trying to get rid of the thoughts in your mind or anything like that, because that never works. You actually have to be embodied and feel the energy in your body. And so now we can do it. I can do it, talking to you, CJ. Like, I can feel the energy traveling in my body. There's a sense of calm. And even if I'm excited, I can feel the little spurts of energy going up and down, in my body as I talk to you. So I'm actually doing stillness while I'm talking to you. So we call that stillness on the fly. So people
That
don't
is
have to
something I
sit
would
there.
definitely have to learn.
Well, there are parts where you're
Really use it.
probably already doing it, but this time it would just be, tuning that consciousness of, it's sort of like doing two things at once. Um,
Mhm.
which people say, well, it's not good to multitask, but actually it's your attention. So it's our attention into our bodies while we are doing something. So I got to tell you this story, CJ, okay, because this might be helpful for some people. So a very practical example of this is, so my parents call one day and they're upset over something. And in the past, when they were upset, I would try to be defensive or try to help them or whatever. cure them, whatever. So they were upset and they thought I was going to be upset at them for what they were saying. So they just said, just hear us out, so they started talking about, whatever. And in the past, like I said, I would be upset because I would want to try to defend myself to what they were saying or accusing me of or whatever. But this time I thought, no, 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 I'm just going to hear them. I'm going to listen and I'm going to feel what it feels like in my body as I'm listening. So they're talking in the, what, the amplitude of what they're saying. And I'm feeling in my body how that's reflected. And as I'm feeling the energy traveling in my body and focusing on that, I could hear what they're saying. I was focused on what they were saying, but I was feeling the body at the same time. And after all that, they were like, "Are you upset?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." I hear you. And I was able to respond from a place of compassion and peace and not defensiveness. And I thought, wow, this is powerful stuff. So I
And
think
did you get that right on the first time, or did it happen over
yeah,
time?
I mean, luckily these days they don't get mad at me that often, but but in that instance, it was like, I'd been practicing, this stillness on the fly for quite a while, so it just, popped into my head, huh? Why don't you do this while they're talking to you and see what happens? And I was like, oh, okay, so the cool thing is that here's the other cool thing, CJ, is when people practice this stillness, it doesn't have to be my way, but my way is just easy for people that are go, go, go. So if people practice this and feel their bodies, if they have a situation that is difficult, they don't know what to do, it's a problem, what happens is you can bring the problem into the meditation, if you will, and you can just entertain the problem, but then feel your body. So you can imagine yourself in that problem situation and then feel the body. And what
Mhm.
happens in that space is that the mind stops thinking because it's so focused on what's going on in the body. And there's like a space, literally a void. And that's when guidance comes in. Now, whether people, believe that it comes from source or comes from your angels, whatever, your own intuition, doesn't really matter, the label. But what'll happen is that the action that is for the highest good will drop into your consciousness, and then you'll sometimes just take action from that space. Like, and I've done it for multiple things. I've done it for even like making money. I decided one day I was gonna, book a trip to someplace. COVID, it didn't work out, but but I booked a trip,
Yeah.
to this place I wanted to go to, and I thought, well, would really love the money to actually pay for this trip. But I knew that my passion and excitement about going to the trip was that, yep, I should do that. Like, I didn't tell myself, no, don't do that. It's not enough money, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I
Mhm.
did that. I booked the trip. And then I said to the universe, okay, show me the money. You're going to help me. You
And
gave me this
then
inspiration.
and
This
it
is going
just
to be really fun.
manifested.
Right. And so I just go into stillness. And then I literally like woke up with an idea. I said, "Oh, I have this program. I haven't really sold it in years, and I don't know. I'll just make it 50% off." Like it was just this idea that popped into my head, and I
Mhm.
ended up, just putting an email out. It was my birthday. I said, "Hey, it's my birthday. I want to give you guys, a deal," and so I ended up, paying like I think I doubled what I was going to pay for the whole vacation. Um, so that's the really cool thing. That's how we can use stillness in a very positive, influential way.
Okay, that's really interesting. And for the audience, if you're listening right now, take some time to be still during the day. It doesn't have to be complicated. According to Dr. Karen, you can do it 10 or 9% of your wake time, and that should also be enough. Now, Dr. Karen, I'm also very interested in the area of longevity, and I'm constantly finding ways to extend human potential and lifespan. In my quest, I've wandered around some of the world's areas called as blue zones. Have you heard of them?
Blue zones.
Blue zones, yeah. So these are geographical locations such as Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, and Ikaria in Greece. And all of these places, people are living an abnormal amount of life past the age of
Mm.
100. So they're sanitarians, super sanitarians, and these are the people who are walking, cycling, driving. And there are so many common factors when you analyze these groups of people. They eat less, they do a lot of fasting, they take time to chill and relax. But perhaps one of the most important things that all of them believe is to have a purpose in life, which experts think gives them the reason to live, and that's why their bodies are helping them live for so long. You also talk about purpose in your work, but you refer to it as your soul's mission. And you have something in the book called the Soul Mission Matrix. Can you briefly elaborate on the soul's mission? Does every soul have a mission, or some people don't and some people do?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting about, these different geographical locations. And so I'm sure we're just at the very, very beginning of researching and understanding this, because, the left brain always wants to understand it logically, but I think there's probably a big energetic component of it that we're not going to be able to measure necessarily with the current instrumentation or even the scientific methods. So I think it's awesome that people are even paying attention to these areas, which is fantastic. And yeah, there's definitely research around purpose. And I think that it's very, very true. If people don't, well, everyone, I do believe that everyone has a mission. But if people don't feel like they have a purpose, then they're less likely to live as long. Which is why, even though my father has been diagnosed with kidney cancer and very low kidney function from his diabetes and heaven for all those different medications they give him, which of course
Mhm.
cause kidney issues. But he has this dream of archiving and organizing like all the paintings from his father and getting his father's name out there as a famous watercolor artist from China. And so because he has that purpose, he's outliving a lot of his friends who are dying left, right, and center from various different things,
Mhm.
strokes, cancers, all that kind of stuff. So even though he has these diagnoses, he's still going because he doesn't feel he's done yet. And I think that's helpful. Now, in the book, The Soul Mission Matrix, chapter 6, I think it is, um, helps us to extract each of our what I call foundational soul mission. And it's kind of like an overarching theme for our life. So we have a chart in there, and we teach you prior to that in other chapters how to do what I call divine muscle testing and how to be as accurate as possible with yes no answers. And then you use the matrix to figure out in this timeline, in this lifetime, if you will, what is my core or foundational mission. Some people have a being mission, which is to vibrate a frequency. A lot of sensitive souls have that. Yesterday I was working with one, and her being mission was to radiate love. So she didn't have a doing mission. A doing mission is more action oriented, and some people have both. So in her case, it didn't matter what she chose to do. She could be a teacher, she could be a healer, she could be a traffic cop. It doesn't really matter as
Mhm.
long as she's beaming out the frequency of love. That she would have accomplished her mission. And many, many sensitive souls are here just to anchor in the frequencies of love, joy, peace. Those are the three most common: love, joy, and peace of the being missions. And in the book there's more, but these are the most common. And then the doing missions are there's some action oriented words like awakening or learning, or in my case it was protecting. And so that's where I did a lot of work with negative spirits, healing them and supporting and protecting Mother Earth, for example, energetically.
Changing
Yeah,
the
and
weather.
so and then here's the cool thing is that I have been finding, at least with my people that I work with, is once they're awakened to their soul mission and they are really being or doing whatever they're supposed to be doing, then a lot of times their soul mission starts to shift and change because they've accomplished it. And this is maybe not as common because most people don't even know why they're here. But when people know why they're here, they can focus on it. And sometimes their mission will change because they're done, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it is surprising. When I was reading about it, I was just so I was in a state of like awe and shock at the same time because I never thought of it, never thought of something like this in the first place. So it's great that you've written about it and people can have access to that in your book at the same time. I also grew up doing Shaolin Kung Fu. I first, when I was
Mm.
growing up, I was kind of obese, and I started practicing kung fu just as a way to defend myself against the bullies. And then I
Mm.
practically fell in love with the art, and I would practice it for many hours a day. Then I would go to these. old video libraries and then rent Chinese cassettes without even having a subtitle. And for anyone who's listening to this and your Generation Z and you're like, video what? It's a place we used to go out and rent movies before internet and Netflix really became a thing. And two of my favorite movie stars were Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. I
Woo!
would
Yeah.
definitely credit a part of my life on and how I've been disciplined to kung fu. I've heard you are a fan of a specific kind of kung fu called Wing Chun. And
Hmm.
again, if people who are listening they don't know, just go watch a movie called Ip Man. There are like five of them. Tell me why in your live events your husband tries to attack you with a flying kick, and what is perception kung fu?
Yeah, perception kung fu is one of the chapters in the book, and so in addition to helping people kind of hone their sensing abilities, intuiting abilities, and manifesting abilities, I think it's really important for people to learn how to practically function in everyday life. So I'm not saying that people are going to be, receiving a flying kick, but I kind of liken the so what we do in these seminars that we meet in person. It's super fun. People freak out at the beginning, but it's super
Mhm,
fun. Is we say, look, we usually have a volunteer at one end of the room, and that volunteer represents the pot of gold or where our goals are, where we want to go. And then
mhm,
we're at the other end of the room, and then as I demonstrate, I walk towards my goal. And then what happens is an obstacle comes in our place. And this often happens. And in fact, once you start to want or go for or commit to a new goal, there has to be an obstacle that comes in your way in order to show you a contrast and also for you to grow bigger than the
mhm,
obstacle in order to reach your goal. So, the obstacle in this case, we talk about in Perception Kung Fu is my husband jumps out and starts doing a flying kick at me. And so we teach the participants, okay, what are our options here? Okay, what like people are like, oh, you can block it, or people say, oh, you can run away, or and those are options. We talk about that in the book. That if you block, the kick. It's sort of like you pushing against an obstacle. Like, I, gosh darn it, I'm gonna get through this, right, with sheer force, and that is an option. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's an option. But there's some downsides to pushing and forcing, and I've done tons of that in my lifetime. Got burnt out. That's one of the cons of that. The pros of that is that you get pretty darn tough. Like you do develop a thick skin, if you will. And when things come your way, if they're difficult, you're like, aha, another obstacle. Okay, I'm gonna get this one too, right? But it gets
mhm,
pretty tiring. So perception kung fu is not that. So then we give the other option where people say, well, you could avoid it. And I'm like, yeah, avoiding, I could jump back, right? And avoid it. But what we notice is that I'm not only no longer closer to my goal, I'm further away from my goal when I do that, when I jump back. So people often will retreat as well. So that is not a viable solution for getting what we say we want by retreating. Perception Kung Fu, on the other hand, is in a physical level what we do in Wing Chun, which is a specific, skill set that's common to all parts of Wing Chun, is that as the kick is coming to us, we just change our angle. And in fact, we step closer to the opponent, or in this case, the obstacle. So, and if we choose to, we can attack the opponent because now they're facing another direction. They're facing where we were, and now we're facing them. This is sort of like giving a haircut over the phone. You have to kind of imagine this,
mhm.
guys. So,
I'm
and
sure our audience has a good imagination.
yeah, and I think it's hilarious because my husband will go at it, right? And people are just like, their eyes are like so big, like, oh my gosh, this flying kick's coming. And all I do is just step one step to the side and turn my body towards him. And then now I can punch, I can do whatever to him. And the kick has completely missed me. So the point in illustrating that is that whenever an obstacle comes in our life, first of all, expect that it's supposed to be there. It's not a big deal. Okay. The second thing is, like, instead of trying to resist it or run away from it, why not change our perspective of it? And why not say, well, okay, so it's here. So now what? How can this be for my highest and greatest good? How can I use this obstacle to get to where I want to go? And so in perception kung fu, and then when we see it visually, when I step to the side and aim towards my husband, I'm actually a lot closer to the goal, to that person on the other end, because I've stepped
Mhm.
towards the obstacle, but I've just angled off so it can't hurt me. So so people really visually can see, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then we have them practice that. And we get into,
So
what
everyone's
happened in
pulling a
life.
flying pig.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So both because my
That's
husband and I are
cool.
trained, right? We know we're not going to hurt somebody, so we go fly and kick at them, and they do the thing, and it's challenging because they're like so scared at the beginning, but then they get it, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is easy," and I'm like, "Yeah, it is."
I'd
So
love
it's
to come
super
to
fun.
one of your events to see that.
Oh, it'll be
Yeah,
so fun.
sounds super fun.
We have so much fun. We giggle so much. It's so fun.
Dr. Karen, I truly appreciate the knowledge, the experience, and the healing you've brought to the rest of the world. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Now, before you go, I would want you to give one piece of advice, just any one piece of advice to our listeners for today. Anything that they can take home.
Yeah. The one piece of advice is just to be, because we're trying so hard to have a good life, and we see so much chaos going on in the world, and it can really unsettle us. But if you just focus on being, I know many teachers said, be in the moment, be in the moment, be present, right? I didn't understand that until I decided to feel my body. Like, what is my body feeling like in this moment? That's how I became present. In that space, all things start to almost like solve themselves. When we radiate that peace within ourselves, then we actually reinforce that peace blueprint, if you will, throughout the world. So it behooves us, for each of us, to be completely 100% responsible for our own minds and bodies and hearts, and being that space of peace. So that is how we help the world.
Thank you so much for sharing
My
that. What is the
pleasure.
best way for our audience to find you? Is it through your website or
Yeah. So I have some bonuses that come with the book. So folks can check out. There's $1,000 of bonuses, including energy healing infused videos and MP3s. And when you listen to them, it does energy healing on you. Some coaching things, and so from myself and many of my partners, helpers, friends. Who are wellness leaders, so people can go to sensitivityisyoursuperpower.com. That's the name of the book, sensitivityisyoursuperpower.com, to get access to those bonuses. And then people can always visit me on my website, karencan.com.
amazing? Thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, CJ. Thanks everyone for listening in.